Cassidy, games, and Ambie, and Crystal, the board game blitzers, we're showing your favorite games.
My number 40 is The Game, which is a cooperative card game where you're working together to try to play all the cards in the deck. The cards go from 2 to 99 and there are 4 piles. 2 piles that can only increase and 2 piles that can only decrease. And you have to play cards on your turn, but you only have a hand of 6 cards each turn. So if you have cards that are in the middle, like 40s or 50s, then you have to destroy a pile, even if it's on one of the edges, and then people can only play cards that are after or before that one. Another interesting thing is that you can play backwards in the pile if it's exactly 10 away from the card, but you can't tell people what cards you have. So you can be like, oh, I want to play on that pile, and you're trying to strategize to try to get rid of your cards and not have to play cards that are really bad. And it's really fun, like playing together, working together to try to get rid of all of your cards. And that's why The Game is my number 40. My number 39 is SNCF, or Paris Connection, which is a train game that's pretty quick and easy to learn. Basically, all you do on your turn is you either trade in the trains you have for other color trains, or you lay track for trains. There's different colors of trains, and you can lay the different track for them, and depending on what cities they hit, they get more points for that color. And at the end of the game, whichever trains you have that are your shares, you multiply that by the points per the color, and that's how much your score is. So you'd start out with a certain number of trains that you own, and you don't know what the other people own. So you're trying to make routes that are good for your companies, but bad for other people. And it can get kind of cutthroat because you could get rid of all of one color and then build really bad track for them just in the middle of nowhere that doesn't hit anything. And then it runs out of trains because each company has a limited number of track. So it's a really fun game that I've played with a lot of different groups. Pretty easy to learn, and it plays in like 15 to 30 minutes. The only problem is the setup takes a long time because you have to randomize the starting trains for each person, and then you have to separate out all the trains and put them on the board. So that can take a while, but I still really like Paris Connection, or SNCF, and that's why it's my number 39. My number 38 is Eldritch Horror, which is a cooperative game. I mentioned Arkham Horror before, and Eldritch Horror is kind of like a successor to that, where you're working together to save the world now from Lovecraftian monsters. So you each have a character, and you can level up your character's powers by going to different locations and doing things there. Each turn you get encounter cards, and you have to roll dice for skill checks to see if you survive or do badly. So it's a pretty epic game, and I like playing as different characters because they all have different backstories and different things that they're good at. So it's fun to go around to the different locations, do the different encounters, and try to do enough to be able to defeat the monsters and win. And that's why I like Eldritch Horror. My number 37 is Patchwork, which is a 2-player competitive game where you're building a quilt. It's pretty abstract. There's little Tetris-like pieces that you're collecting and putting on your board, and you have a grid on your board, and you're trying to fill up as much spaces as you can. But you have to pay buttons to get the pieces, and then you also have to go along a board, the time track. And so you're trying to optimize paying the least amount to get the most pieces to fill up your board. And some of the pieces also give you income in buttons, so you're trying to balance out that. And since it's 2-player, you're also seeing what the other person's board has and trying to make sure they can't fill it up as well as you can. So it's a really fun spatial game, and I like spatial games. And also there's a bonus for getting to a 7x7 complete grid first, which is fun to go for even if you don't necessarily win by getting that, because someone else could still do better. But Patchwork is a great game. My number 36 is Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition. I have not yet played Twilight Imperium 4th Edition, so I don't know anything about that. But I do like Twilight Imperium 3, which is an epic space game. there's a lot of things going on in the game. Basically, you're trying to get the most points, and there's different objective cards that are out on the table, and you have a secret objective, and all of those will give you points. But to do that, you can build up your ships, you can increase your technologies, you can fight battles and try to conquer different planets, and there's a lot of stuff going on. One cool thing about it is that each round everyone gets a strategy card, and it has a power that they can do for their action, but it also has a secondary power that other people can choose to do when that person executes their action. So even if it's not your turn, you're still active in the game, because when other people do their strategy card, you can choose to do the action as well. So you're always invested in the game, and it takes a long time to play, like the average of an hour per player, but even though it takes so long, it feels like it goes fast because you're always invested in the game. So I really like building up the armies and going for the objectives, and I like the technology track a lot because I like increasing technology to compound on itself. So I like Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. My number 35 is Deep Sea Adventure, which is a quick game where you're on a submarine trying to go down and get treasure and try to get the most treasure, but you all share the same oxygen tank. So each turn you're rolling a die to see how far you can move down, and each space is a potential treasure. And you can either choose to pick it up or not pick it up. And whenever you pick up treasure, you move slower, so you'll roll the die minus the number of treasure you have. And the further down you go, the better the treasure is, but then the harder it is to get back up, because if you don't get back up to the submarine before the air runs out, then you faint and all your treasure is gone. So it lasts 3 rounds too, so each round the treasure that sunk goes to the bottom, and so it's easier to get the better treasure. But it's really fun. Just sometimes you can just try to get a lot of treasure to soak up all the air, because you breathe more also when you get more treasure, and you're just trying to soak up all the air so that other people will faint, and you just try to get as much treasure as you can and try to make it back to the submarine, but sometimes you can't. So it's a really fun, quick game, and that's why I like Deep Sea Adventure. My number 34 is 18CLE, which is another 18xx game. There are a couple cool things I like about 18CLE. First, there's a national company that forms when corporations don't have trains. So usually when a corporation doesn't have train in other 18xx games like 1830, then the person who's the president has to buy the train for that corporation. But in 18CLE, once a corporation doesn't have a train, then it gets absorbed into this national company. So if you're a president of a corporation and you don't care about it, you can try to make sure it gets absorbed into the national company. But if you want to make sure it doesn't get absorbed, because you can make it worth more if it's not absorbed, then you have to make sure that it can always get a train. So it's a different type of pressure than I'm used to in 1830, which is interesting. Another cool thing about 18CLE is that usually in other games, as tiles upgrade, they improve. But in 18CLE, at the brown phase, which is the 3rd upgrade phase, they decrease price dramatically because of the Great Depression. So you don't really want to upgrade them to brown, but if you do, then they'll automatically upgrade to gray later, which is a lot better. So there's a trade-off there, and you can also block people off really well because of the way the tracks are. So it's a pretty interesting game, and I've had a lot of fun playing it, and that's why 18CLE is my number 34. My number 33 is Igloo Pop, which is a sound game, I guess. So in Igloo Pop, you're shaking these igloos that have little beads inside them and trying to determine by, I guess, their feel and their sound, how many beads they have inside them. Each round there are different cards on the table that have different numbers on them saying how many beads are in each igloo. They range from 1 to 3 different numbers, and the ones with only 1 number are worth more points than the ones with 3 numbers. But you have these betting chips, and each time you pick up an igloo, shake it, you can bet with a chip with the igloo and put it on one of the cards to say, I think it has that many beads in it. And if you're right, then you get the card as points, and if you're wrong, then you lose your betting chip. What's really neat is that multiple people can bet on the same card, and anyone who's wrong loses their chip, but whoever's right gets that chip, and the chip is worth extra points. So there's some strategy in putting bets on cards that other people have bet on if you think you're right. But it's a lot of fun, pretty quick, and it's an interesting mechanism because you're using sound. So that's why Igloo Pop is my number 33. My number 32 is Android Netrunner, which is a 2-player card game. It's a living card game, which is where you get a core set with a bunch of stuff, but then there's also a lot of expansions you buy. And we used to play at tournaments too, so it gets pretty serious. But basically, there are 2 sides, the corporations and the runners, and it's a cyberpunk theme. The runners are trying to hack into the corporations, and the corporations are trying to score points with agendas. So it's very asymmetrical, and I like the theme too. But the gameplay is you build a deck of cards beforehand, and then you bring that to play. And you have 2 different decks because you have the 2 different sides. So the runner plays against the corporation, and you're not sure what's in the other person's deck. And there's a lot of bluffing because the corporation plays cards that are hidden down, and the runner has to determine how to get past those cards without really knowing what's there yet until they start trying to get past. So the corporation can do damage to the runner and other things. And there's a lot of different cards that do a lot of different things. It gets kind of overwhelming. But it's a really fun 2-player game, and I used to play it a lot. I no longer have it because it was getting expensive and difficult to keep up with all the tournaments, but I still really think it's a great game. And that's why Android Netrunner is my number 32. My number 31 is The Mind, which is a new cooperative card game where you're trying to play cards in order. There are a certain number of rounds, and each round you get that number of cards. So round 1, everyone gets 1 card. Round 2, everyone gets 2 cards. And the cards are numbered 1 through 100. You can't talk during the game, and there are no turns. It's just you play your card whenever you want to, and you have to play in order. So it's a lot of looking at someone else and determining by how much they hesitate when you want to play. It's really exciting when people have cards that are one after another and they're just going boom, boom, boom. Or if they're both trying to play and they don't know which one will play first. So if you play out of order, you lose a life, and if you lose all your lives, you lose. But I really enjoy it, and it's really interesting playing with the same group multiple times in a row because you get better at reading them, and it's like there's a lot of mind games in it. So I really enjoy playing The Mind, and that's why it's my number 31.